Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. The 2023 Purdue football season has come to an end as the Boilermakers rallied to take down Indiana in a wild 35-31 affair on Saturday afternoon. Purdue finishes the season with a 4-8 record and now enters a critical few weeks that could determine the trajectory of the program under Coach Ryan Walters as he prepares for year two. I'll break down the win over Indiana here on the show today, and we'll start to look ahead, take a peek at what's next for the Boilermakers as a very critical offseason begins. Real quick, if you don't already, follow the show on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. Lots to talk about there with the transfer portal coming up, with recruiting signing day coming up. Purdue basketball will be number 1 tomorrow afternoon. That'll be exciting. Plenty to talk about there. Follow on Twitter @BoilersBeyond and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I am looking forward to doing a little bit more deep look later this week into what's next for the Purdue football program, into what lies ahead in the future. And I need questions for that. I would love to do a deep mailbag, so send over questions on Twitter, or you can email them to me, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. And I just wanted to say thank you to all of you who listened throughout the season. I know this was not the best season of Purdue football that any of us have encountered, right? I think a lot of us have been around this program for a while. Some of us have seen some ups, some of us have seen some downs. This year certainly was not Purdue's best, but I want to say thank you to all of you who listened throughout. I hope this show made it worthwhile. I hope it was worth your time, and I hope it made the season a little bit more enjoyable. You know, even though this season did not ultimately end up how Purdue fans hoped, but it did end on a positive note. Purdue 35, Indiana 31. The Boilermakers will hold on to the Old Oaken Bucket for the 3rd year in a row. You know, this game was kind of what I expected. I thought this was going to be a good game. I thought this was a bit of a coin flip game, right? It was 2 3-8 teams for a reason. Neither team is particularly good. I guess was now that the season's over. But neither team was particularly good. These teams were 3-8 for a reason, but it was a good game. It was entertaining, and that's all you can ask for. If you're just a neutral observer here, obviously Purdue fans go home happy. Indiana fans go home sad, although as I record this at 10:45 on Sunday morning, maybe Indiana fans are a little happier now that Tom Allen has been let go. But, you know, nothing quite illustrated what this game was better than the fact that Indiana blows a 10-point fourth quarter lead, Purdue comes back, Purdue wins it. That kind of summed it up. It wasn't pretty, lots of missed opportunities on both sides, but you know what? It delivered. It was a good game, and there was quite the crowd on hand to watch it. I know traffic driving home after was wild. Worst traffic I've encountered in a while. So, a positive note to end this season. You know, some takeaways from this game. Purdue needed Hudson Card to be fantastic on Saturday. And he was. He was more than that. He was absolutely terrific for Purdue. Keep in mind, he was not close to full health. You know, he missed last week's game at Northwestern with a rib injury. Those things don't exactly heal in 1 week. It's not like he was banged up to the point where he couldn't play last Saturday and then magically 100% this Saturday. He wasn't even close to fully healthy, but he turned in a fantastic performance. 21 for 34 passing, 275, 3 touchdowns. He leads Purdue in rushing with 85 yards and a touchdown on 12 carries. Purdue needed a huge effort from him, and it got it. He saved his best for last this year. It was not really a linear season for him. You know, he showed some promise early on in the year. Then he gets banged up, really struggles in the month of October. Iowa, Ohio State, Nebraska, he really struggled. At Michigan, whatever. But those last 2 games he played, Minnesota and Indiana, he was brilliant for Purdue. And that's the Hudson card you hoped you were getting out of the transfer portal. That's the Hudson card you got. And that's what, as you begin to look forward for Purdue, that's the Hudson card you're hoping you can get on a consistent basis next fall. If you can get that, boy, you feel a lot better about your quarterback situation going into next year on November 26th than you did on October 26th, because he was great. And he did this, the receiving core was depleted. TJ Sheffield enters the transfer portal on Wednesday. He doesn't play, didn't go through senior day. Can't claim to know any of the insides there, but he doesn't play. Andrew Sawinski out with an injury. Keep in mind that Mershawn Rice, Abdur-Rahman Yassin, both out for the year with injuries. So Purdue's rolling with Deion Burks, with Jaden Dixon-Veal, and with Jerron Tibbs. That's about it. We saw Purdue go with a lot of 12 personnel, 2 tight ends on the field almost all of the game, whether it was Garrett Miller and George Burhen, or then George Burhen and Drew Bibber. Purdue switched that up a lot. We hadn't seen much of that from Purdue this year. Purdue adapted to what it had, and Card made it work. The offensive line really struggled. Card was running for his life back there. Some of the plays he made with his feet were just outstanding. He extended some plays that he had no business turning into completions, but he did. It was a really, really impressive performance. That was special. He closed this season out really strong. You saw some true freshmen make big impacts. Look at George Burhen. Really his first extended action of the year. 5 receptions, 74 yards, and a touchdown. Great game for him. It comes as a bit of a double-edged sword. Garrett Miller goes down. He gets carted off the field. That's a bummer to see. He'd gone through a lot to get back on the field. You heard him in some of his media availability detail how it wasn't until this October that he felt fully healthy again after his ACL tear in fall camp last year in August. Going down, getting carted off, it didn't look good. I don't know, if or when we'll get an update on that, but it didn't look good. You hope he's all right. I don't know what he will do. He does have another year of eligibility should he want it. Time will tell. But that was a bummer. Focus on the positive with George Burhen, though. He looked great. He's really athletic. He was able to do some nice things with the ball in his hands. On that first touchdown drive, you saw him extend a play yards after the catch, and then a catch and run to get into the end zone. He's a promising guy. There's a lot to like about the future of the tight end spot between he and Max Clare. Keep in mind he went down against Illinois and was out for the season after that. Those two have a nice little pass catching duo, kind of what you want from the tight end spot in the pass system that Purdue's going to run here. There's a lot to like there. Jerron Tibbs snags 3 passes in his most extended action at receiver. That was good to see. Someone who generated some buzz in fall camp gets a bit of an opportunity. He looks good. Need to take steps forward, no doubt, but he looks like a piece you can work with. Of course, Dylan Thieneman is kind of in his own category here. He sets the freshman interception record at Purdue, 6 picks on the season. He picks off 2 on Saturday. A great season for him. Someone who should be on all of those freshman All-American lists. He was spectacular. He had a great season, closes as Purdue's leading tackler on the year. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but he was great. Where would that defense be without him? That's kind of the question. You see Will Helt, Derek Rogers Jr. both get some action on defense. You total that up. That's 5 true freshmen who made some impacts for you, who certainly didn't redshirt. I know those 5 didn't. I'd have to look to see if any others did burn a redshirt, but it's not always ideal to do that. In a perfect world, you don't really play many true freshmen unless you have to, or unless they are just that good. Purdue's going to be better in the long term because of this, because you got these guys action. Dylan Thieneman's going to be a guy next year who's probably on some preseason all-conference lists. George Burhen, Jerron Tibbs, Will Helt, Derek Rogers, guys who got valuable reps this year. Was it always pretty? Not necessarily, but that's something Purdue can build on. Getting those guys some action was real good. I said Thieneman breaks the freshman interception record. Cam Allen closes out his career with another pick. He finishes tied for second on the school leaderboard with 13 interceptions. He and Ricardo Allen tied there behind Stu Schweigert. Purdue pulls away with a win here. Purdue pulls away with a really nice win. This was very close to being a loss. And if Purdue had not, either Purdue doesn't score on that last drive, or Indiana goes down and scores a touchdown. Nick Scorton doesn't make that tackle for loss on the QB keeper on 4th down. Indiana goes down and scores. You look at Purdue's special teams is where Purdue lost this game. I detailed this a little bit last week. Purdue doesn't have a true special teams coach, special teams coordinator, however you phrase it. I don't know if that changes, but something has to change with Purdue's special teams. Give Ben Freehill some credit because he did bounce back, and he makes 3 of his 4 kicks, couple down the wire that, were massive for Purdue. But, let's look at this. Purdue misses a 30-yard field goal on the first possession of the game. Purdue scores its first touchdown, and you have a botched PAT. The snap-hold combination was not good. I didn't get a chance to watch it enough on replay to see really what was wrong, but it wasn't on the kicker. Indiana returns a kickoff for a touchdown. Why Purdue bothered kicking it to Jalen Lucas, I don't know. Make Indiana go down the field on you. He's too good. Especially if you're not going to kick it out of the end zone, and Purdue doesn't have that giant leg out there. Later in the game, Purdue jumps off sides on an IU punt. It was 4th and 4, leads to an Indiana first down. The Hoosiers go down and score a touchdown there. Yes, I heard folks say IU move first. Deal with it. You can't get called for offsides there. You just can't. Those are losing plays for Purdue. Now, you could certainly look at the other side of the other sideline and say there were losing plays there too. That's why they don't have a coach right now. That's just reality. That's what Indiana football's been for the last 3 years. Purdue needs to be better than that. Purdue dodged a bullet. Purdue pulled away with a win. Special teams cannot be this big of an issue next year. Purdue finishes 8 of 17 kicking field goals on the year. That's not going to cut it. Jack Ansel was really up and down this year. Year 3 as a starter, boy, I don't know. You need better than that. I thought Purdue's defense was fine. It made the plays when it needed to. It comes up with 3 interceptions in the first half to keep Purdue kind of alive. Towards the end of that first half, Indiana was throwing the ball all over Purdue. Purdue couldn't stop Donovan McCulley. Indiana was throwing at Zion Steptoe just over and over and over again. There's nothing Purdue can do. You have to have another corner out there. Markevius Brown was largely fine this year, but once Marquise Wilson went down, that other corner slot became a question. You saw Botros Alessandro get plugged in there some. You saw Derek Rogers get plugged in there some. Now Zion Steptoe finished the season starting the last 2 games. Look, it was a year of adjustment for that cornerback position at Purdue because so much changed by playing almost exclusively man. But again, Purdue's got to make steps there moving forward. The defense did enough, though. You look at that play by Nick Scorton to close the game out. That was spectacular. It really was. He caps off just a brilliant season. Fantastic stuff. But, the offense did just enough. It did enough to win this thing. It puts up 35 points. And, you look at the defense only giving up 24 because 7 of that came on the kickoff return. 24 points is enough to win you games. It should be. At Purdue, 24 points is good enough. Offense does enough. What a play. The fourth quarter was great. On that 4th and 2, Hudson Card fakes a quarterback draw, throws to a wide open Devin Mockabee down the sideline for a touchdown. Then, Purdue gets the ball back down by 3. And I think it was the first play of the drive. Hudson Card hits Deion Burks down the sideline for a 44-yard gain, sets up the touchdown. It's not all Graham Harrell's fault, guys. He schemed up some good stuff. There's only so much you can do with what Purdue has. Was Graham Harrell perfect this season? Definitely not. But there's only so much you can do. I thought Purdue did a nice job of scheming up some good offense on Saturday. Purdue finishes this game outgaining IU by, 86 yards, 453 to 369. Purdue is pretty good. Purdue is pretty good. I don't think, 5.6 yards per play, that's solid. Purdue did enough to win this thing on offense. It's a really good win for Purdue. Big picture, what does it really mean? Not a ton. The difference between 3-9 and 4-8 is negligible, but there's something to be said for winning both your trophy games this year. Ryan Walters said after the game it was the only goal that the team had this year that it really accomplished. There's something to be said for beating both your rivals, though. I think as we move into the new world of college football, that's going to be something that means more to fans, especially of the programs that aren't going to be annual college football playoff contenders. I think that's something to hang your hat on. It gives fans a positive to close the season on, and that's big. Season ticket renewals will come out, and you want fans to think of that November afternoon when Purdue comes back to beat Indiana. What a crowd that was. My goodness. It was a cold day in West Lafayette. 2 3-8 teams. Purdue fans showed out well. Credit to Indiana fans as well. They showed out fairly well. You take out the student section, which had some gaps as to be expected, being Thanksgiving break and all. Great turnout. A really great turnout. A fun environment. That was a good one. That's a really good way to close the season. Something to smile about. You keep the Old Oaken Bucket for the 3rd straight year. That's really positive. We can acknowledge that Indiana's not a very good team. We can acknowledge that Purdue really didn't beat a good team all year. Yes, Virginia Tech's going bowling at 6-6 in a bad ACC. Yes, Minnesota's, going to be one of the 5-7 bowl teams, but Purdue's 4 wins didn't exactly come against great competition. That's okay. This season was not about the wins and losses. It wasn't. Especially once you realized what this roster was. Some of us, saw it pretty early that this team was pretty limited. It's a developmental year. It's a bit of a program year. I think you've seen enough to feel like this thing can head in the right direction. Now you move forward and you have a giant month ahead of you here. Month to, month and a half. This week is all about recruiting the current locker room. There are players on this roster who will be in demand by other programs. That much is cut and dry. There are good players on this team. Purdue has to keep the players it wants to keep. There's going to be plenty of turnover in the transfer portal. We know that, especially with the new coach rule that Ryan Walters can still utilize to free up some scholarships. There's going to be some turnover. Purdue's going to hit the portal hard. But what you can't afford to do is lose some of the players you really want to keep. That's an NIL thing. That's a buy-in thing. There's plenty of factors there. But Purdue needs an influx of talent on the roster badly. You saw some of these games this year when Purdue was just overwhelmed. Purdue couldn't get things going offensively, when the offensive line couldn't hold up, when receivers couldn't create any separation. Defensively, Purdue was certainly limited. Purdue needs to have a more talented starting 22 next year when it takes the field against Indiana State in the season opener. It's going to start in the transfer portal. Purdue will look to get this strong recruiting class signed. Signing day is December 20th. I don't anticipate a ton of changes to that class, but you never know until pen gets put to paper. Purdue will look to finish that strong. But the transfer portal is so key because you don't want to count on that class next year. If you're counting on those true freshmen to make a big impact, you're going to be sitting here in the same spot next year with an underwhelming record, looking, some of the good impacts true freshmen made, but, saying it wasn't enough. Purdue's got to really flip this roster pretty good and get some more talent on there and keep the talent it has. This is a really, really big month for Purdue. Couple questions to close this out, but first I just wanted to, point out this is kind of the end of Purdue football as we know it to a degree. The next time Purdue takes the field, the Big Ten will have 18 teams. The college football playoff will have 12 teams. You're in the super conference era. The Pac-12 doesn't really exist anymore the next time Purdue takes the field. Everything looks different. The college football world shifts massively. Expectations as we knew it for Purdue look different, and talking about that momentarily, but everything in the landscape of college football looks different. We got about the perfect end to the Big Ten West on Friday with that Nebraska-Iowa game. Couldn't have scripted up a better way for the Big Ten West to go out. It's been a ride, guys. It has been. It's been the last decade of Big Ten football has been quite interesting with the Big Ten West. 4 or 5 of those teams made a conference title game in that span. Purdue, Northwestern, Wisconsin, Iowa, all did. The imbalance of the Big Ten divisions are gone, but now you have a whole different can of worms to open. So it is interesting just to think about how different things will look next year, and we don't really know fully until it gets here. But 2 questions here on the way out, both kind of about the future of Purdue football. And again, I want to do more of a look ahead, moving on, in the future for Purdue. Would like to do some of that later this week, so send over some questions. But 2 questions here from a listener. Number 1, if a casual college football fan asked you how many wins Purdue should have year in, year out, what would be your answer? Now that the 4 schools from the Pac-12 are joining the conference, he points out, Jeff Brom, Joe Tiller got to 8-win seasons. Certainly different challenges for those 2 coaches, but he asks, is 7 to 8 wins where Ryan Walters should be by year 3? It's hard, right? I don't know how realistic that is in the expanded Big Ten. Let's look at next year. Purdue takes on Notre Dame. It goes to Oregon State, which will look different now that Jonathan Smith took the Michigan State job. You go to Wisconsin. You go to Ohio State. You host Oregon. You host Penn State. I mean, that's a loaded schedule. You throw out Indiana State, and the rest of those games are all against Big Ten teams. Not that Illinois and Northwestern and Nebraska and Indiana are God's gift to football. Same with Michigan State. But, I mean, are you going to run the table and win all of those? That's what you're looking at in the future. Let me pull up here some of Purdue's future non-conference opponents. I'm looking at this, and all right, so 2026, 2027, 2028, Purdue plays multiple Power 5 non-conference games in all 3 of those years. So in 4 of the next 5 years, Purdue has multiple Power 5 non-conference games. It plays 11 Power 5 games. If you can get to 7 to 8 wins, Ryan Walters is going to have some decisions to make, because if you can win 7 to 8 games at Purdue in the expanded Big Ten, you're a hell of a coach. Plain and simple. I don't think it's unrealistic to want to get there, but I mean that's going to require a great job done. Because let's face it, that's been the ceiling for Purdue historically. Purdue's won 10 games once ever. The Purdue Rose Bowl team was an 8-3 team that lost the Rose Bowl, finished 8-4. That's kind of reality for Purdue. So I think if you can be a consistent bowl team, that's probably pretty good. And if you get that special quarterback play or a big-time defense that comes together, then you can look at better than that. And he says each season has its inflection point, the game that kind of dictates the direction of the season. He looks back at like 2019 against Minnesota, the Iowa upset in 2021, and then he says the Syracuse game from this year, because that's when fans probably realized that this team wasn't going to go bowling. He says looking to 24, what game can be that? And he says the Nebraska game would be his pick. I kind of agree with that. Purdue starts like this: Indiana State, Notre Dame, at Oregon State, Nebraska. That's your first 4 games. Through 4 games, Purdue cannot be 1-3. That can't be your outcome. You should beat Indiana State, obviously. Notre Dame will present plenty of challenges, but at Oregon State, Nebraska, you got to take 2 of those, or 1 of the 2, at least. Because if you're 1-3 with trips to Wisconsin and Ohio State, home games against Oregon and Penn State, and then needing to run the table against everyone else just to get to 5-7, if you lose those 4, you're going to start having real apathy set in. And that's quite dangerous for this program. I'd agree with you. Oregon State and Nebraska are the 2 I would point at. And I would just say this, it is a very big ask to get Purdue to a bowl next year. Just looking at this schedule, it's not easy. It's not easy at all. But welcome to it. This is what Purdue and Indiana and Minnesota and Illinois and everyone else signed up for when they voted to accept those 4 Pac-12 schools. When they voted to take that TV money, this is what you signed up for. The future is daunting, but someone's got to do it. Time to play ball, as they say. You're in the batter's box now. So that's all I have for today. Again, thank you to all of you who hung around this season. I appreciate you all listening. On a positive note, I think basketball season will be a little bit more upbeat to talk about. But I'll be back here later this week. We'll talk about where football goes next, and we'll talk about where basketball sits heading into Big Ten play as it tips off Friday at Northwestern. Of course, Purdue plays Tuesday against Texas Southern. I'll talk about that as well. Plan on recording Wednesday, so please send over your questions on Twitter at BoilersBeyond or over email, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you guys take care, and I look forward to talking to you all winter long. Take care, everybody.